This is not going to be about the coronavirus epidemic. This instead is about the Vox AC30 amp. A while ago, I watched a video about the blues in America. At one point in that story, black blues musicians moved in large numbers from the deep agricultural South to the urban industrial North, many of them settling in Chicago, where there was abundant electricity, a power absent in the very rural South. Some of the guitar players, like Muddy Waters, plugged into that power, and a new sound was born. The blues was finding its way into rock and roll. Since that time, I have learned another story intimately connected to the electric guitar, that linchpin of rock. The rock and roll sound crossed the Atlantic, and soon England, the young people, was hopping and bopping. And that brings us to Jennings Musical Industries in Dartford, England. Tom Jennings had worked in an arms factory in the Second World War. He also played the accordion, and a friend of his, also working in the plant, Dick Denny, played the guitar. To calm their fellow employees during air raids, the two of them would play as the bombs dropped around them. After the war, Tom Jennings opened a music store, selling instruments, of course, but he was also interested in making them, too. He built an odd contraption he called the Univox, a keyboard working off an amplifier, sort of an early synthesizer. He didn't know what to do with it, and when he looked around at the clubs, many musicians were playing electric guitars, and they needed amps. So he took the amp from his Univox and called it the G10. But it wasn't very good. That's when he thought of his guitar-playing friend, Dick Denny. He got in touch with Denny and asked him if he could design an amp for an electric guitar. Denny built an amp that used alternating current and produced 15 watts, so he called his product the AC15. One of the hottest bands in England at the time was the Shadows, and they started using the AC15. They liked it, but they came back to Denny and they said, "Can you give us something bigger, something louder?" Because they had a problem. When they played, the young girls would go crazy with the screaming, and no one could hear what they were playing. Could Denny help them out? Denny went to Jennings and asked if he could build a bigger amp. Jennings said, "No, we don't want that." Denny went ahead with work on it anyway. Jennings found out and he was furious. They argued. Denny told Jennings he already had an order for the new amp, and Jennings said, "All right, go ahead, make 10 of them. It's on your head." Denny put two speakers together, called it the Twin, and thus was born the Jennings Musical Industries Vox AC30 valve amplifier. The British word for a tube was a valve. The Shadows loved their new amp. They were nearly audible now over the screaming. One day, a man named Brian Epstein showed up at the office in Dartford, and he said He was the manager of a band playing in the Star Club in Hamburg, Germany. Would Jennings give him some free amps? Well, no, but a deal was worked out, partly consisting of a promise that the band, the Beatles, would never use any equipment other than Vox. They never did, and the promotional value of the deal proved to be immense. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were born in Dartford, and they were using Vox. Brian Jones was playing a Vox teardrop guitar. Dick Denny showed up one day with a little gadget he called the OXO box. It caused crazy distortion. Jennings said, "We're known for our clear sound. We don't need that. We don't want that." Denny said, "You'll see." 4 weeks later, the Stones came out with Satisfaction, played through what they called a fuzz box, Dick Denny's little toy. All the British bands had to have Vox, and when the British invasion recrossed the Atlantic, they came armed with Vox amplifiers. Jennings got a license to make Vox amps in the U.S. Business was so good, the factory could not keep up with the orders, and Jennings sold part of the company to raise money that would boost the inventory. But the company he partnered with took money out of Vox and bankrupted it. Then the board fired Tom Jennings. 4 other companies have since owned Vox, and the amps are now made in China. The Vox amp was different in sound from Fender and Marshall. Vox amps were known for their pure sound. Musicians called it clean and glossy. They have very low levels of distortion and no negative feedback. Dick Denny said he didn't need the feedback, that the little distortion that there was made the guitar sound better. Musicians agreed. The amp was made for an electric guitar. At low levels, the sound you get is the note you play on the string. Push that a little to about halfway, and you get what Brian May of Queen calls creamy saturation. Certainly sounds like a good thing. And when you press on and go all out, full roar, then you get what May calls the full, rich, throaty sound. So there it is, the Vox AC30 valve amp. For many, the sound of rock and roll.